Thank you, and while we're just getting that presentation up, can I just take the time first to congratulate Bruce and the team he's got at EDA Victoria. A fantastic job you're doing with this conference, fantastic job you're doing with a whole lot of other initiatives, so well done you. And can I just also take the time to again acknowledge our sponsors, Regional Development Company and RDV, but also particularly ID, Urban Enterprise ICN, who have been on board with EDA for a very long time, and that's a wonderful thing to happen. I've left out Remplan because I want to thank them specially, because if Remplan weren't sponsoring this conference today, I wouldn't be here, because Matthew Nicol was at the dinner last night, and when the bus left without me, I had no way of getting home. So thank you, Matthew. So, perception's an interesting thing. There we go. And a lot of people in the room here probably haven't even been to Werribee, so I just want to describe it a little bit. And typically this might be all you've ever seen of Werribee. A street sign halfway between Melbourne and Geelong, halfway between the two largest cities in Victoria. That is a significant asset to have. So locationally we were very well positioned. Perception's a little bit about this at Werribee at the moment. There's a view that we grow houses, and we certainly do that. There's a view that a bit of that happens as well. But doesn't that happen everywhere? Wyndham, the city of Wyndham, is far more complex than that. It's got a lot to offer. Public art like this. This is on the, this area here is a place called Lake Borrie. It has the highest proliferation of migratory birds in Australia, apart from Kakadu National Park. We've got a beach. This is a typical house in Wyndham. And a typical backyard pet. A typical garden. And a typical front lawn. This is emerging out of the ground as we speak. It's spoken about for 30 years. This is Wyndham Harbour. It'll be the largest marina on Port Phillip Bay. This is just a typical bunch of girls walking down the street in Watton Street. And like many other regions, Wyndham has many assets. Its people, its natural assets, its infrastructure, and its locational advantage. And this is a significant natural asset. This could be Catherine Gorge, but it's not. It's the Werribee River. This shot here is taken about 1.5 kilometres downstream from the Werribee city centre. The Werribee city centre is the only metropolitan city centre of its type in Melbourne that has a river that doesn't just run by the doorstep, it runs right through the middle of it. And I'll be talking about that a little bit as we move forward. Now, it does concern me about the perception of Werribee a little bit. We get a little bit hung up about it. Werribee isn't full of bogans. Werribee isn't full of people that look like this guy here. You will not see this person walk down the main street of Werribee. This is not your typical Werribee person. So I'll need you to clear your minds and understand there's nobody like that in Werribee. So what does the Werribee/Wyndham resident look like? Well, in a nutshell, he's one of a population now of 200,000. If he moved to Werribee in the last 12 months, he's one of 12,000 people. Think about that. In the last 3 years, Wyndham has welcomed the same population that exists in Warrnambool, and over the last 7 or 8 years, the population of Bendigo. That is a lot of people, and that's a lot of challenges. We're a diverse community. Jobs, local jobs are critical. 67% of our workforce has to travel outside the municipality to work. Our jobs growth is strong, but unfortunately our population growth is much stronger, and that's a challenge. We're a culturally diverse community, not unlike Dandenong. We have very large pockets of very well educated people that have been imported into the region in the last 4 to 5 years, particularly driven by Chinese and Indians who are very highly skilled. They love living in places like Point Cook, but we don't have the jobs for them. And it's about transitioning our economy from this traditional blue-collar economy into the white-collar economy we talk about in this so-called knowledge-based economy. Now, with all that background, what we've got here is we've got Wyndham as a 21st century city. Problem is, the capital, so to speak, of Wyndham, Werribee, is still stuck in about 1967. Sort of. This shot wasn't taken last week, by the way. And I really enjoyed Kevin's presentation, and you know, there's a lot that mirrors what we're trying to achieve in Wyndham. But back when it was, where were we? About 2005, when they put out the planning document, Melbourne at 5 million. They designated a whole lot of places around the metropolitan area's principal activity centres, and we just assumed Werribee would be one of them. But we weren't. So it was fantastic to see Dandenong get $290 million as a result of those initiatives, great government initiative. Werribee got $290 million less than Dandenong. So what did we do? This is my CEO. We did that for a little while and we said, you know what? We don't need money. We're going to do this in spite of that. We understand where Werribee is positioned in a metropolitan context, and we understand how critical it is, not just to the development of Wyndham, and not just to the development of Melbourne's West, but to the development of greater metropolitan Melbourne. So we thought, we can't do this on our own, because quite often I think local government's great at navel-gazing. We need to get some people in that will give us a different view. So we put together an expert panel. Here they are. And on that expert panel was heading it was a guy called Chris Banks, who headed up Dolphin Lend Lease for many years, chairman of the Metropolitan Planning Authority. Gilbert from Village Well, who many of you know, and a guy called John Denton from renowned architecture firm Denton Corker Marshall. I was sort of around the back somewhere serving tea to these people. And we started to put together a plan and a vision. We started to build the bones of a vision. And when we sort of worked it through, we had this grand vision, and part of it was that Werribee would be the capital of Melbourne's New West. So after we built the vision, we had to go to our, we employed a place manager, but with a very strong strategic planning background, and we employed our strategic planners to actually build up a land use for the Werribee city centre, and essentially a precinct structure plan. So they got together. I've got a photo of one of them right here. There they are, and they got their coloured pencils and their crayons out, and they developed up the plan. Now, one of those looked a little bit like this. So I'm really just talking about the Werribee city centre today, which is that bottom blue bit. But there's this other little thing happening just to the east of the Werribee city centre called the East Werribee Employment Precinct. It was just recently designated as a national employment cluster, had a vision for 60,000 jobs in it. It's currently under the ownership of the state government, but 400 hectares of that 750 hectare site will be in private hands over the next couple of months. And that's going to be a real game changer for the Western region and a real game changer for Wyndham. So after we'd sort of developed up the plan and undertaken the draft sort of PSP planning, it was time to take our vision, or our draft vision, to the community so that they'd take ownership of it. And this is a sort of a process that many of you would be familiar with. So we ran a number of 4 or 5 public meetings, attended roughly by about 150, 200 people at each of those meetings, so they were extremely well attended. You know, sort of a local government, let's have a get together and have fun sort of scenario. And we told them what we'd been planning, and we asked them to, you know, to take ownership, and then for their input into the vision and into the plan. And through that, things were massaged and changed a little bit. It was important that we showed that we were taking on leadership. So what we did was we got our mayor to get up, we coached him and coached him how to sell the story. And here he is here, there he is there. And we sold the story and we sold the story. And the interesting thing, at the same time we were selling this story and people were embracing it, Geoffrey Rush and Barry Humphries were standing on the steps of the Camberwell train station telling everybody, please do not develop here. And that's That's fine for that community, and that's what that community want. We had people complaining that we should have done this 25 years ago. So the community very much embraced it very quickly. At the start it was a little bit touchy when we sort of went to the community, because there was a little bit of uncertainty. This photo was taken at the first meeting. But generally they really did embrace it, and part of the vision, the sales pitch, was images that looked like this and this. So if you can imagine that, well, you don't have to imagine, it's there. That is the Werribee River. Council has already determined that they're going to invest $20 million into it started off as a boardwalk, but now it's a promenade that goes along the back of the Watton Street, which is the main street of Werribee, and connects the developments at Watton Street back into the river. So you have this sort of dual frontage thing happening. This is pretty much the precinct structure plan. I'm colourblind, so I struggle with this bit. But essentially, just to sort of, very briefly, the red bits, ideally, our ideal building heights there are 7 to 10 stories. You can go higher than that if you wish, depending on the design. The orange, 5 to 7, and the yellow, 2 to 3. So the red bit is essentially where the strip shopping centre exists now, and the rest is pretty much residential, but this plan sets that aside, and that's now a mixed-use zone. So this is now embedded into the Wyndham planning scheme as a central activity zone. So in terms of, and I did promise Wendy Denning that I was going to use the word leverage in my presentation, so there I just used it. So the river is very important. If you look at the way Melbourne was developed previously, you know, for 150 years, what did we do? We turned our back on it. We turned our back on the Yarra River. And yet over the last 25 years, that's completely changed. And this is very similar to what we're trying to achieve here in Werribee. We had to show that we were fair dinkum. We had to show the community that we wanted to invest in this. So the first thing we did was we built this. This is a bridge, a pedestrian bridge, that connects the activity centre to the river and a park that sits on the other side of the river. It's a $9 million bridge. It's not just some simple concrete structure that was done on the cheap, and it's subsequently won numerous architectural awards. The Wyndham Civic Centre is located outside of Werribee, so we wanted to show that we were committed to the Werribee City Centre. That was the excuse anyway, so we set up the Werribee Development Centre as a shop front within the Werribee City Centre. Now this has a number of advantages, the biggest one being that I don't have to spend my time at the Civic Centre, and there are numerous coffee shops in Watton Street. So that's set up as a front of house display, and we do a lot of our pre-app planning discussions in there, and it just gives us, I guess, a sense that we're commercially focused and you're not sort of working with Big Brother, and it works quite well. So that's kind of the ready and the set, and that's the easy part. But where economic development personnel kick in is the go bit, and that's where we're at now, and that's the hard bit. And why is it hard? Because we've got this vision. And typically that development that's sitting there is a 2-storey development. It was the first development that was built that actually embraced the river, so it's got dual frontage to Watton Street and the river. It sits next to a piazza that council invested in. But we're not there at the vision, because if we breach the vision now, that Rain and Horn real estate agency sitting there wouldn't be a Rain and Horn real estate agency, it'd be a cafe. So for us, at the moment, the vision's up there and the market's down there. So we have to work to pull them together a little bit. We don't want to bring the vision down too far. We need to keep it hovering up there, but we need to bring the market up. We need to draw them closer. How do we sort of intend to do that? Well, in part, we need to influence and create the market ourselves if we possibly can, and we are in a position to do that. So in more recent times, we've been doing a number of what we call market sounding activities. We are lucky that council holds a number of strategic sites within the Werribee City Centre, as indicated by the stars there. We recently purchased the top star, which was an old car yard. We've recently purchased that for future development, but the Werribee City Centre has a significant parking problem. It is a very busy city centre. It's got very low retail vacancy rates. It always has. So parking is an issue. So we've purchased that initially just to offset some of the parking problems, but ultimately in the longer term it's a future development site. The big red dot is a privately owned piece of land in 2 lots. It totals 10,000 square metres, and it's a good indicator that the market and the vision aren't aligned just yet, because this place has been on the market for probably 3 or 4 years and it's yet to sell. Got close, but it's still there. So these are just some of the challenges. So we've gone out, and once again, we went back to our experts, or one of them, or a new one actually, who a specialty in sort of commercial market assessments and so forth, because as councils can navel gaze, and we had people, and I know this is being recorded, so I'm on dangerous ground here, but you know, let's put a library there and let's put a community centre there, and that's all fantastic, but that's not going to do anything to excite the commercial developer. So we've undertaken a whole lot of market sounding interviews with developers who are work in Wyndham and developers that don't work in Wyndham, to get their view of, if we give you this piece of land, or if you can have access to this piece of land, or if we sell this piece of land to you, or if you partner up with Wyndham City Council on this piece of land, what can you do with it? And that's where we're at the moment. And in the next probably couple of months, we'll be looking to put one of those sites on the market. So it was very interesting because our market guru was very straightforward with our councils and said, this piece of land here that's by the Werribee River, that's actually set aside in the precinct structure plan to take a development of at least 20 stories if need be, this is the most valuable site commercially. You need to do something super duper commercially on this site. So whether that's, you know, activated street frontage, office and residential on top, or whatever it looks like. So that's where we're at with that. So on Tuesday, we officially sort of launched the marketing campaign that sits around the Grow Werribee campaign, and that's being launched at 55 Collins Street in the city by our local member and the treasurer, Tim Pallas. So it's an exciting time for the Werribee City Centre. It's an exciting time for the East Werribee Employment Precinct, because, as I said, it's about to go into private hands, and when that happens, something else will happen with it. So I thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.